penetration, demoralization of the intelligence community. Have you seen this in your career, Alex? Would you be able to say that?
I've seen it in spades, actually. The old hands who'd gone through the Cold War, particularly in GCHQ's old J division, the Soviet Union branch, were characterized by enormous worldly wisdom and cynicism about new agendas. And I saw them in the 2000s being weeded out, enticed into early retirement through golden handshakes and the like, because there was no room for them in the new system. You were meant in the new system to go on prejudice or to be susceptible to mind pictures that were spun for you by the few handlers who really ran the intelligence community, who I'm increasingly convinced contain a healthy, or sorry, a large sprinkling of Satanists and child abusers in key nodes. And of course, a lot of what they do to achieve their effects is by using the knowledge and connections from inside the service, but projecting that to clubs outside the service, which then tout for business to get the dirty work done. So yes, I have seen, above all the demoralization, it was a terribly depressed place in some ways, GCHQ, and people shouldn't get me wrong. I always say when I get onto this point, I had happy and fulfilled years there and found hundreds of extremely competent and well-versed people in all shades of the sense of the word in GCHQ. But there is a general tenor of my memories of GCHQ, and not just myself by any means, but many of my fellow analysts and even some of the techies that I had less to do with, but I did come across them, a general pall hanging over the scene of sometimes it developed into absolute depression. And I have met more than one, particularly fellow linguist, who left GCHQ and in some cases went abroad, as I did afterwards. And I bumped into them in later life, because the professions like linguistics and computer programming are not that great, and you will not that numerous, and you will come across your old colleagues in later life. What a lot of them have said is, I was suicidally depressed. And in some cases, the staff counsellor or the internal shoulder to cry on service said, why don't you just resign? You clearly don't fit in here. This happened repeatedly, actually. And the thing I think that a lot of the depressed people had in common is that they were particularly conscientious and could not tolerate the passing off of mediocre work as though it were the old gold standard GCHQ work of the 1980s.
And it's a personal question. You may choose not to answer it, but you left GCHQ, Alex. Was this change in the culture part of the reason that you left?
Yes, although I was only inchoately aware of it at that point. It was a gut feeling. There was a time when I found myself shouting at my nearest and dearest and thought, this is not me, what's come over me? Because what was incongruent in my head was, I loved the job, I loved the calling, but I couldn't square it with why we kept finding things coming out of left field and predetermined outcomes being imposed on not just GCHQ, but the whole of the formal security and foreign policy apparatus of Britain and the United States. Clearly, when certain countries that were within our protection did bad things, went to war when they weren't supposed to or whatever, this had been pre-nodded through by people that we knew very little about. And many of my dearest fellow specialists were literally tearing their hair out, or I would speak to their wives and they would say, he's getting a big problem with his stomach acid or whatever, because of this, this despair. So it was part of, I was looking for a pretext, as it were, to bow out gracefully. And in my case, it was meeting the right woman to move abroad to marry. But there was a whole bunch of us, I think, that were in the same position, that couldn't understand why we were so listless in what was supposed to be our dream job.